Good morning. Thanks very much for the invitation to speak with you guys today. Social, you can't talk about social without talking about data. And it's interesting that Mark couldn't talk about data without talking about social. So there's been some nice segues there. Because after all, what are we all doing here? Why are we here? In unaugmented reality. Because we like to look at each other in the eyes. We like to shake each other's hands. We like to connect digitally, of course, to everyone else watching, streaming on the internet. But we are, by design, social creatures. So one of the things I want to do in the next 20 minutes is kind of almost dissuade you of all that organisational speak that we drenched ourselves in the 20th century. Trying to knock you a little bit sideways about what we're trying to achieve as 7 billion hapless individuals floating around space on this planet. We are social. Saying that, when my MacBook crashed massively last night and I tweeted out #OMA anyone there, I didn't hear from any of you. So I think by that you can expect different communities in different parts of the world have different adoption rates for social. But it's important that you guys, as standard setting guys, set those standards with this future in mind, because it's not just the future, it's happening around us right now. Let's set the scene, as if our previous two speakers haven't done so already. 90% of today's data has been created in the last 2 years. Just think about that. We've been around for quite a few thousand years, possibly longer, depending on what you subscribe to. And paucity of data was the issue that marked anything to do with business in the 20th century, anything to do with government in the 20th century, anything to do with society in the 20th century. The problem and the opportunity right now is having too much of the stuff. We're inundated. And this is my way of reflecting where organisations find themselves today. You will find the caveat at the bottom of the screen, for illustration purposes only, not the result of quantitative research or analysis. But fundamentally, it shows you that the vast majority of individuals and organisations are up the left. They have next to no big data capability whatsoever. Excel possibly is about as far as their analysis can go. And then right at the other end of the spectrum, we've got some Googles, some Facebooks, some interesting companies who have developed incredible analytical expertises, the SASs of this world, the IBMs, etc. You know them better than I do. That is an abnormal curve. At some time between now and sometime in the future, it will become a normal curve. So as we segue into the social media aspects of life today, let's just remind ourselves on the personal data types. And this picks up actually as just a slightly different way of saying what Mark was saying, but in slightly different language. First of all, there's the stuff that my mum knows she's sharing. I always invoke my mum because she's not a geek like me, she's just normal. So she knows that when she posts photos, they've gone public. She knows that when she makes posts, they're public. Might not always be quite aware of the capabilities of social analytics services, the likes of Brandwatch, Sysomos, Radian6. But she knows it's there for people to read, even if they use machines as a proxy to distill the understanding of social content. Then we have observed data. This is the transactional history. This is trying to record everything that we can about what that individual is doing. Location data being the most frequently quoted example. And from my reading, from my talking to people, they're not currently aware of the depth nor the breadth of that observation. So we have some expectation challenges, again, that Mark referred to, that is being raised in parliaments around the world. And then we get to inferred data, and this is where big data steps up to the mark. Through data analysis, through combining data sets that we've never before put together, through them mining that result, we can decipher some incredible insights. We can also breach people's expectations for what we should and should not know about them. You'll have all read about case studies of large data sets that have been anonymized, but because they're effectively the fingerprint of only one of the 7 billion of us on the planet, they can be, in the new lexicon, de-anonymized quite easily. And individuals are largely ignorant and powerless, and you can't blame them for being suspicious. So this is the greatest opportunity we as a species have to fix some of our biggest problems in the world, and it's also the biggest pain in the ass. Data, of course, has no value of itself. What do I mean by that? Well, everyone here knows about the data, information, knowledge, wisdom stack. A collection of data is not information. For that, we have to apply context and understanding. And of course, a collection of information by itself is not knowledge. It has to be slotted into a framework that can give us some predictive power to understand how things will work. That's almost the definition of knowledge. Which means that what we're looking at here is not a black and white circumstances like we might have been used to in the 20th century. If data has no value of itself alone, if the data is intangible and, after all, can be replicated at negligible cost, then what does property mean? What does it's mine mean? What does it's yours mean? You see what I mean? The way we've talked about property no longer applies. Here's a few perspectives on the use of data from a report called Unlocking the Value of Personal Data by the World Economic Forum. We know that data used to be actively collected with user awareness. We had to ask them to complete a survey, for example. Now, the vast majority of this big data stuff is being harvested passively, possibly without telling them. And it's therefore difficult to even notify the individual that this is going on, because they're not even quite aware that it's happening. I addressed a bunch of marketing alumni at a presentation a couple of months ago, and when I told them that Westfield malls were tracking the footfall, the route round the mall that customers take, they said, it can't be because I've not installed the Westfield app. I said, you don't need the Westfield app. You're talking to masks, triangulation, bit of maths, Bob's your uncle. We can track that mobile's progress around the mall. How can I stop that, was the next question. And these are marketing graduates, right? You'd think they want to get hold of this information in order to work out where the best place in the mall is to put the store, for example. I said, take the battery out, but you will find making a call really rather difficult. What can you say? This is the kind of questions we're getting from people who should know this through their profession, let alone the rest of society. The definition of personal data used to be predetermined and binary. We always used to know what personal data meant. It was a data point about me that made sense of itself. But now we're recognizing in the age of big data that a lot of that requires context. It's dependent on the way we interpret it, and the way we interpret it is largely contingent on the social norms in the society in question. Data used to be collected for a specific use. Do you know why? Because it used to be incredibly expensive to gather it. Now, well, it's not. It's cheap as chips. Effectively, it's almost a byproduct of what we've been building. The economic value and innovation comes from then combining those data sets. The user used to be the data subject. Now that we're a little more enlightened, we can look at the user not just as the data subject, but as the data controller, or indeed the data processor. And I'm going to come back to that point a bit more in a few slides. The individual used to provide legal consent but wasn't really truly engaged. Once they sent off the market research questionnaire, whatever it might be, they didn't expect to get any feedback whatsoever on their contribution to that data set. Far too difficult, far too expensive. That's changed. Boy, do they want to know where they sit in the world. It's reasons like that, for example, that a company like OPower in the US is combining utility data in order to, if you like, almost gamify the consumption of electricity, of gas, of water, such that house owners can not just view their data for their household, but can then benchmark it against other households in their neighbourhood. How am I doing? Damn, I'm in the bottom quartile. My carbon footprint stinks. I've got to do something about this. This is an incredible opportunity. Policy frameworks used to focus on minimising the risks to the individual. Now, because there's so much societal benefit to be gained, for example, from understanding how transport systems are working in a city, that we want, by definition as a society, to get hold of that person's location data for the wider good. So, do we allow them to opt out? That's the data scene, if you like. Let me move on to the social aspects now, so-called social media. And I'm not, would you believe it, going to mention Facebook, except just there. I'm going to try and paint a picture of social media in its wider context, what it can mean for us for the rest of the decade and beyond. It's not social media that actually matters, as much as our press is enthusiastic for it, as much as conference organisers like to stuff the word social into every conference title you can think of in order to get bums on seats. It's not social media that matters. We don't have media for media's sake, we only have it to communicate. And we don't communicate for communication's sake, but to influence others and to have them influence us back. That's the fabric of organisational life. That is the fabric of life. Here's a definition of social business then. It's slightly different from the ones you might have heard of, where social business is someone on Facebook with a Twitter account. To me, that's a business that's got some social media going on. Social business is so much more than that. I'll read this verbatim if you don't mind. It entails designing an organisation around those influence flows. How are we changing minds and behaviours? How are we having our minds and behaviours changed? It's connecting everyone involved in that organisation's success. It's connecting all the data, information and knowledge around it more openly, more productively and profitably, using the kind of tech that you guys invent. When you do that, that's social business. In fact, you could say that social media are just the eggs in the social business cake. Bit of a throwaway line, I know, but it implies that other ingredients are needed. Possibly a chef and an oven, but at that point the analogy really breaks down. I hope you understand what I mean when social media are just the eggs in the social business cake. And because influence changes dynamically, an organisation has to change dynamically. And by organisation I mean that in the loosest sense. The for-profit company, the non-profit company, the government, the local neighbourhood, the society. We have to be agile. Today's approach and structure of our organisations should suit today's needs, but because tomorrow is different, social business lends us the opportunity to adapt the way in which we best execute our mission and pursue our vision. At the moment, those organisations have been using IT massively. I mean, the IT budgets invested in the last 20 years, well, you don't need me to tell you that many millions of many different currencies have been invested to make the best of this IT capability. But we haven't really done it very well. Let's have a look at CRM and other ways to annoy the customer. CRM and social analytics today are not customer-centric, despite the C at the beginning of CRM. They're in fact an organisation view of the customer. When we try to infer more about that customer, we make mistakes. And then we increase the number of misperceptions and misconceptions we have about that individual. Everyone in this room will have received an Amazon recommendation that was woefully wrong. I had a chap who wanted to present me his new social analytics capability a couple of months ago, and he said, look, we know you're an expert on red wine. I said, I know that there's two types, there's red and white, and that's about the extent of my wine knowledge, right? But his analysis had got stuff wrong. It wasn't a good demo. This is a quote from a story I've written recently. Storytelling is the best way, the most compelling way to explain to people how the world has changed. It's the oldest way, it's innate. So I've written a story, and this is a quote that one of the characters in that story says. In apparently attempting to put the customer first, today's organisations have amassed all this high-tech weaponry to lend it that microscopic visibility on the individual, its relationship with the customer. But the customer has nothing like that kind of capability. The customer is adrift, uncertain of what the company knows, or, more accurately, think it knows, and is unable to find out. Just as social media was rebalancing the relationship, allowing individuals to coalesce their voice and be heard in various uprisings of various kinds around the world, the balance of power is once again going against the customer, the individual, the citizen, and he knows it, or at least feels it and lives with the consequences. And yet social media, the vision, the enthusiasm we had for it just a few years ago was so much more than the way it's manifest in 2013. If business is the activity of creating mutual value, the consequence of which is profit, and if doing social in the business is the activity of nurturing relationships, building mutual understanding, securing the interest and enthusiasm to collaborate, then what better way to achieve that than to use the technologies we're describing today to empower and equip the individual with the same insight as big co and big government have acquired for themselves at great expense in recent years. This is the future of social. So customer relationship management has been around 15 odd years. Vendor relationship management, if you like, is the other side of the coin. It's like me as a customer being able to manage my relationship with those vendors. So I understand as much about how I interact and transact with the supermarket as the supermarket knows about me. The supermarkets, of course, were early exponents of big data. There's a lovely urban myth that they can actually tell when a woman's pregnant before she even suspects it herself. And I don't mean she's bought a pregnancy kit, right? Just gently different retail purchasing habits betray with some statistical confidence that she might be pregnant. That's the kind of power we're talking about here. And yet, I have no idea how much milk I've bought from my supermarket in the last couple of months. There is no facility for me to get hold of that information. How sociable is that? I don't think it's particularly sociable. And yet, longer term, we're not just talking about empowering us as individuals, as customers, but also as citizens, as employees, as vendors, as suppliers, as family members, as friends, as custodians of the planet. In every one of our individual roles, we should be equipping ourselves with the kind of stuff that you thought you were coming here today to talk about equipping organisations with. That's social media. Here's the question. Here's an acid test. Do you help all the individuals with an interest in your organisation build richer, more productive relationships with each other and others, allowing them to coalesce by need and desire, by knowledge and capability, by shared values, and, one would hope, shared value? Do you do that? Because that's what we can do with big data. And if we start designing standards without that in mind, we're missing a big trick. One of two things will happen. We'll miss out on that eventuality to great cost for everyone on this planet, or your standards will be ignored, and we don't want that. You have the opportunity to realise this vision, to improve markets, society and life, or you can continue to define standards to maintain the status quo, applying new technologies to maintain and grow current power imbalances. It's absolutely your choice. I hope you know which one I'd go for of the two. That's the book that was referred to earlier, and if you would prefer one that's free, then you can download a Tenzi, a social business story that explores some of this in good old-fashioned storytelling format at atenzi.com. Thank you very much for inviting me today, and look forward to your questions later.